The sound of breaking glass cut through the Thanksgiving chatter like gunfire. 1 second, the dining room was all clinking cutlery and the sweet burn of roasted turkey and stuffing. The next, my father's whiskey glass slipped from his hand, hit the hardwood, and exploded into a spray of crystal and amber that splashed his boots and the table leg. Nobody moved. Everyone just stared at Liam. My 8-year-old sat halfway down the long table in a borrowed white shirt, a faint purple smear blossoming under his left eye. He'd just come back from the bathroom, shoulders hunched, napkin twisted in his hands. He blinked, as if he couldn't understand why the room had gone so quiet. "Say that again," Frank said. His voice wasn't loud. I'd heard it loud. This was worse, low, dangerous. The tone that used to freeze my spine when I was Liam's age. Liam glanced at me. I could feel my heart beating up under my collarbone, crowding the space where my rank tabs usually rested. Today I was in a sweater and jeans, my uniform hanging upstairs in my old closet like a question I hadn't answered yet. "It's okay," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You can say it." He sucked in a breath. "Grandpa said boys only cry if they're weak," Liam whispered. "And you used to cry all the time when you were little. So you were weak too." He dropped his eyes to his plate. The bruise under his lashes looked darker in the chandelier light. A fork slipped from someone's hand with a soft metallic clink. The smell of gravy and cranberry sauce turned sour in my nose. "Oh my God," my sister Deborah muttered. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. At the head of the table, my father's face went white. The stories he'd told about himself, tough but fair, ex-Marine, long-suffering patriarch, didn't fit around this moment. They cracked. He stared at his empty hand like he hadn't meant to let go of the glass. Shards glinted at his feet, catching the light, a perfect, fractured circle around the place his heel had just been.
"Frank," my mother breathed. "Tell me you didn't—"
"I just gave the boy a lesson,"
he snapped automatically, old reflex firing.
"Boys needs toughening. He tripped. Don't make a federal case out of nothing."
His gaze flicked to me. This was the part where I was supposed to laugh it off, to say Liam was clumsy, to smooth it like Mom always did, to shrink. Instead, I looked at my son. "Did you trip?" I asked. Liam shook his head once. "No, ma'am," he said, voice small. "He grabbed me, in the hallway. It hurt. I cried and then he said, 'That stuff.' He swallowed. He said you only got strong 'cause he beat the weak out of you." The words landed like a fist on the table. My brother Michael let out a low whistle that died halfway. "Dad," he said, tone stripped of its usual humor. "Come on." My father's jaw clenched. "It was just a tap," he insisted. "He's fine, look at him. We're all too soft nowadays. That boy needs some backbone. Julia turned out fine." My napkin crumpled in my fist. I could smell the onions in the green bean casserole, the butter in the rolls, the faint tang of dish soap from the kitchen sink. Ordinary domestic smells. None of them matched the pressure building behind my eyes or the way my chest had started to buzz, the same way it did right before a mission went sideways. "I didn't turn out fine because of you," I heard myself say. "I turned out fine in spite of you." His head snapped toward me. "What did you say?" he asked. Every eye at the table swung with his. Liam's fingers found the sleeve of my sweater, tiny grip tight. "Mom?" he whispered. I put my hand over his. I'd faced down convoys under fire, negotiated fuel deliveries in places where the wrong word could get someone killed, sat through casualty briefings that smelled like stale coffee and grief. None of that felt as dangerous as this table.
None of those rooms had held a man who thought he'd made me strong by teaching me to fear him. I took a breath, the air thick with turkey steam and 30 years of silence. "Dad," I said, every word measured. "Whatever you think, discipline is? It ends with me. You don't lay a hand on my son again. The glass at his feet glinted back up at him. For once, he didn't have an immediate answer. The silence stretched, long and taut. I could almost hear my own pulse in my ears, counting down to something I'd spent my entire adult life avoiding. Finally saying out loud what this house had always been to me, and what I refused to let it be for my child. The bruise under Liam's eye pulled me straight back to the hallway at 11 years old. Same house, same light, different kid. Back then, the wallpaper was newer, the floral pattern brighter. The air had smelled like pine sol and cigarette smoke. Now it was cinnamon candles and whatever detergent Mom bought on sale. But the feel of the hardwood under my socks hadn't changed. Neither had the hand around a skinny wrist. "Quit sniveling," he'd said then. "Mercers don't cry. You want to be one of those weak kids? Go live with them." I'd said no, sir. Not because I agreed. Because I'd learned early that resistance got you nowhere but the floor. At the table now, 25 years and a couple of wars later, that same hand flexed where it rested near the empty whiskey ring. Across from me, Michael stared at the bruise on Liam like he was seeing our childhood for the first time. "Dad," he said slowly, "you put your hands on him. Today. Are you hearing yourself?" "He's a boy," Dad snapped. "He needs to learn. World's not kind." Liam flinched at the sharpness in his voice. I pushed my chair back with a soft scrape. The sound made the turkey knife rattle in its carving stand. I got up, the wood cool under my bare feet, and walked around the table to Liam. The smell of gravy and wine and scorched pie crust hit me in waves as I passed each dish. I knelt so we were eye level. "Does your head hurt?" I asked quietly. He shook his head, then hesitated. "A little," he admitted. "Mostly, I feel bad." "You didn't do anything wrong," I said. "Look at me. You did nothing wrong." His eyes filled, lashes trembling over the bruise. "But he said I was crying because I was weak," Liam whispered. "And he said you used to cry a lot, so you were weak too." The words came out in a rush, like he'd been holding them behind his teeth. He stared at his plate. "I don't want you to be weak," he added, almost inaudible. Heat climbed the back of my neck. Behind me, I heard Mom's breath hitch. The chandelier lights hummed, throwing soft shadows over the linen tablecloth. I placed my palm gently on Liam's cheek, fingers careful near the bruise. "Listen to me," I said. "Being scared doesn't make you weak. Crying doesn't make you weak. You know what makes you strong?" He shook his head. "Telling the truth when you're scared," I said, "like you just did." His small shoulders relaxed a fraction. I stood up. Every eye followed. Dad leaned back in his chair, posture slipping from righteous to defensive. "Julia, sit down," he said. "You're overreacting. It was a tap. My father did worse to me. I turned out fine." There it was, the family gospel. He raised us the way he'd been raised. We should be grateful he'd softened it. Memories rolled in, fast and sharp as gravel under bare feet. The porch swing creaking under his weight as he lectured me about my attitude. His boots in the hallway, the way my stomach dropped when they paused outside my door. Mom's voice in the kitchen downstairs, too bright, offering cookies after a talk. My own tears swallowed down so hard my throat hurt. In basic, drill sergeants had yelled in my face until spit hit my eyelashes. I'd stood there, eyes front, breathing through it. It had felt simpler, honest. They wanted me tougher because the job required it, not because my tears offended their idea of themselves. Dad jabbed a finger at Liam. "That boy needs to hear it now," he said. World eats soft kids alive. You know that. Your army.
I turned to him fully. I am Army, I said. I lead soldiers through places that would eat you alive. I've seen what real discipline looks like. It's not this. His mouth twisted.
Oh, so now you're better than me?
He said.
Because you got bars and I didn't?
He paused, sneer curling.
You cried like a baby at 16,
he added.
Remember? That first boy dumped you. You bawled for days. I had to toughen you up then, too.
There it was. The old humiliation, dragged onto the table like some kind of proof. Deborah's fork clinked against her plate. Dad, she said sharply. Stop. Mom's voice came from the far end, thin. Frank, please, she whispered. Not now. Not like this. He barreled over both of them.
That crying did you no good,
he said.
World doesn't care about your tears.
He gestured around, knocking his spoon against a bowl of cranberries.
I made you strong,
he said.
You're a captain because I toughened you. You should be thanking me, not tearing me down in my own house.
The words hit a familiar place, one he'd carved out in me years ago. The part of me that believed I owed him my spine. I felt Liam's hand curl back into my sweater. Mom, he whispered again. I looked down at him. 8 years old, eyes rimmed red, bruise darkening. He'd never seen me in uniform. Not really. I kept that world and this one separate, thinking I was protecting him. In that moment, I realized I'd protected my parents more than my kid. I didn't get strong because you hurt me, I said, looking at my father. I got strong because no one protected me, so I learned to protect myself. He snorted. Drama, he said. Michael shifted in his chair, knuckles white around his fork. Dad, he said, voice tight.
You used to inspect our rooms with a ruler. You remember that? Measure the distance between our folded shirts. Flip the mattress if you felt like it. That wasn't structure. That was terror. That's how the Corps trained me, Dad shot back. You lot have gone soft. The Corps didn't tell you to grab an 8-year-old in the hallway, I said. That was you. He opened his mouth. No words came out. His gaze flicked to Liam's bruise and skittered away. The scrape of chair legs signaled someone standing. Deborah. She rarely stood up to him. I can't pretend this is fine anymore, she said, voice shaking but clear. I used to tell myself you were strict. I told my friends you were tough but fair. But I remember you slapping Michael for spilling milk. I remember you grabbing Julia's arm so hard she had fingerprint bruises. We knew not to cry because it made you worse. Mom covered her eyes with one hand. Stop, she whispered. Please. Deborah shook her head, tears in her eyes now. No, Mom, she said. We always stop. We always smooth it over. Look at Liam. Everyone looked. One small boy at a big table with a purple mark under his eye and shame on his face that didn't belong to him. He's the one being brave, she said. Not us. Silence settled over the gravy boats and half-carved turkey. My father shifted in his chair. For the first time, I saw something crack in his expression. Not just anger, not just defensiveness. Something like confusion. Like the story he'd narrated for 60 years had sprung a leak he couldn't patch with another back in my day speech. I didn't abuse you, he said finally, but the claim sounded smaller. I gave you structure. That house felt more like a war zone than half the places I've deployed, I said, voice quiet. At least downrange, I knew where the danger was coming from. He stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. You're saying I was the enemy? He asked. I looked down at Liam, then at my siblings, my mother, all frozen in their own old roles. I'm saying I won't let you treat my son like collateral damage in your war with your father's ghost, I said. I heard Michael exhale, a breath he'd been holding for decades. The furnace kicked on with a whoomp, warm air rushing through the vents. From somewhere down the hall, the old porch swing creaked once in the wind. A familiar sound from childhood evenings when I'd sit inside and listen to it, trying to judge his mood by the rhythm of its squeak. At the table now, everything felt balanced on a similar hinge. I had a choice. I could back down, make a joke, let "that's just how he is" win again. Or I could stay vertical, even with my knees shaking, and draw a line I should have drawn for my own sake years ago. I'm taking Liam upstairs, I said, my hand still on his shoulder. We're cleaning this up. When I come back down, we are not pretending this didn't happen. I turned to my son. You coming with me, soldier? I asked. He nodded, eyes huge. As we walked away from the table, my father's voice followed, quieter than I'd expected. Julia, he said, don't poison him against me. I paused at the doorway. You did that yourself, I said over my shoulder. I'm just not covering it up anymore. The hallway felt narrower than it used to. The old floral wallpaper brushed my sleeve. Liam's small hand in mine shook, but he kept walking. Halfway up the stairs, he looked back at the dining room. Mom, he said. Yeah, buddy? I wasn't weak, was I? I squeezed his hand. No, I said. You were honest. That's stronger than most adults at that table. He nodded, lips pressed together. As we reached the top step, the murmur of voices rose behind us. Mom's sob, Michael's muted curse, Deborah saying, "We can't ignore this." And my father's silence, heavier than any shouted order he'd ever given. Upstairs, the air was cooler, quieter. The battlefield was downstairs now. And for the first time in my life, I hadn't left myself behind on it. Liam's old guest room still had the same faded rocket ship curtains from when Michael's kids were little. The air up there was cooler, tinged with dust and the faint must of old books. Downstairs, the murmur of voices turned into a muffled hum, like a TV left on in another apartment. I closed the bedroom door behind us. The click sounded louder than it should have. Liam sat on the edge of the bed, socks digging into the worn quilt. His fingers worried the hem, twisting the fabric until it creaked. I grabbed the little first aid kit from the bathroom, the one Mom always kept under the sink, full of Band-Aids with cartoon characters and antiseptic wipes that smelled like old mint and rubbing alcohol. Can I touch it? I asked, sitting beside him. He nodded. I gently tilted his chin, angling his face toward the lamplight. The bruise was uglier up close, a small, angry bloom under soft skin. He grabbed, "Here?" I asked. Liam mimed the motion, big hand, quick squeeze. He said to stop sniffling, he whispered. Then he squeezed. It hurt. I was scared. There was that word again. Not weak. Scared. You did the right thing, I said, coming back, telling me. He sniffed. But everyone looked mad, he said. I thought, maybe I shouldn't have said it. They were mad because the truth landed, I said. That doesn't make it wrong. I dabbed gently at the spot with a cool cloth. He hissed, then relaxed. Do soldiers cry? He asked suddenly. His eyes were on my hands, but I could feel the weight of the question. All the time, I said. Sometimes when nobody sees. Sometimes in the open. I've seen grown men sob over photos of their kids. I've seen tough sergeants cry when they lose someone.
You know what we call that? What? He whispered. Being human, I said. You know what we call people who pretend they never feel scared? He thought about it. Liars? He tried. A laugh punched out of me. Yeah, I said. Usually. He smiled, just a little. I set the cloth down,
Flexed my hand to keep from clenching it into a fist. You know why Grandpa says what he says? I asked.
because he's mean? Liam guessed. He learned it from someone, I said. His dad. Probably his dad's dad. They thought hurting people made them strong. They were wrong. But nobody told them. So they passed it on like it was wisdom. Like a bad chain email, Liam said. Exactly like a bad chain email, I said. He looked down at his lap. Can he change? He asked. The question landed harder than anything downstairs. I took a breath, the room smelling like old laundry detergent and childhood. People can change if they choose to, I said. But you don't have to stand there and get hurt while they decide. That's my job, to protect you. He nodded slowly. I didn't want you to be sad, he said. When he said you were weak, I thought, maybe you'd be mad at me for repeating it. My chest squeezed. Hey, I said, look at me. He did, eyes glassy. If you ever hear someone say something about me that feels wrong, I said, you can always tell me. Even if it's a grown-up, especially if it's a grown-up. That doesn't make you a tattletale. It makes you brave. He chewed his lip. Okay, he said. Then, quieter. Were you scared of him? When you were my age? The truth sat heavy on my tongue. I could have softened it. Said a little. Said sometimes. But that would have been another layer of silence. Yes, I said. I was scared of him. A lot. He frowned. How did you get strong then? He asked. I thought of long runs in basic under a sky that smelled like dust and sweat and rain. The first time I stood up to a superior who was wrong on a convoy route. The way my hands stopped shaking the day I realized my soldiers looked to me for calm, not my father. I got strong by deciding I never wanted to make anyone feel like I did in this house, I said. I got strong by learning what real discipline is. It isn't fear. It's responsibility. It's taking care of people.
Like I'm taking care of you right now. He leaned his head against my arm. The quiet hung between us, softer now. My phone buzzed in my pocket, the vibration against my hip a little shock. I pulled it out. Riley, Sergeant Cole. I texted her on the way up. Might need a lifeline later. Stand by. Now, you alive? I sent back, upstairs, kid's okay. I finally said it. She replied immediately. You finally dropped the sandbag. Proud of you. Remember, you're not 8 anymore. You're the officer in this op. I stared at the screen for a second, then slid the phone away. Was that your army friend? Liam asked. Yeah, I said. She reminded me I'm not that little girl at the table anymore. You're my mom, he said. Simple. True. Exactly, I said. He yawned suddenly, jaw cracking. You tired? I asked. He nodded. All the grown-up feelings, he said. They make my head heavy. I smiled. Lie down, I said. I'll stay until you fall asleep. He crawled under the quilt, the rocket ships wrinkling around his shoulders. The bruise stood out against his pale skin, a small, stubborn mark of impact. As his breathing slowed, I stared at the ceiling,
tracing the cracks in the plaster. Downstairs, the occasional clink of dishes drifted up, the muffled thump of a cupboard. No raised voices, no slammed doors, just something shifting. My mind wandered back over years I tried not to think about. The first time Dad made me stand at attention in the living room for talking back. The way he'd inspect our backpacks like we were contraband smugglers. The night I'd packed in a fury at 18, shoving clothes into a duffel that smelled like cheap detergent and adrenaline. Mom standing in the doorway, dish towel in her hands. "You don't have to do this, you know," she'd said. "The army. You could stay. Go to community college. Get a job here. Find a nice boy." "I can't breathe here," I'd said. "I need out." "Your father is just strict," she'd replied. "He loves you."
He wants you safe. Safe, I'd repeated. It doesn't feel like safe. She hadn't answered. The day I shipped out, Dad had said, "We'll see how tough you really are when a drill sergeant gets in your face." He'd laughed like it was a joke. They'd yelled at me, like he said, but they'd never grabbed my wrist because my eyes were wet. They'd never called me weak for feeling. They'd just told me to move, to improve, to get up and try again. Somehow, that had felt more like love than anything I'd gotten in the house I was lying in now. Liam snored softly. I brushed hair off his forehead. "You did good today," I murmured, even if it didn't feel like it. I pressed a kiss to the unbruised side of his face, then slipped off the bed carefully, the floor cool under my feet. By the door, I paused, hand on the knob. Going back downstairs felt like walking toward a different kind of firefight, one with no cover and no clear rules of engagement. A part of me wanted to stay up here. Let Mom smooth it over. Let tomorrow arrive like nothing had happened. My phone buzzed again. "Riley, you can do this, Merc. You walk into hot zones for a living. This time, the hot zone just has doilies." A short laugh escaped me. She wasn't wrong. I opened the door. The hallway smelled like old dust and turkey. The stairwell yawned ahead, each step thick with memories. When I was little, I'd run down these stairs holding my breath, listening for the sound of a glass hitting the table, a sigh, a "Julia, get in here." Tonight, I walked down them slow, hand on the railing, heart thudding, but breathing. At the bottom, I could see into the dining room. The plates were mostly cleared now, leftovers covered in foil. The shattered glass gone, a faint, damp mark on the floor where it had been. The chairs were empty. Voices drifted from the living room instead, low and uneven. Mom's, Michael's, Deborah's, and my father's, quieter than I'd ever heard it. I stepped off the last stair and turned toward the noise. The old reflex to stay small in this house tugging at my shoulders. I straightened them anyway. Downstairs, the battle wasn't over, but for the first time, I was going back into it as who I was now. Not Frank Mercer's scared little girl. Captain Julia Mercer, Liam's mother, and the one person in this family who was done mistaking fear for love. The living room looked smaller than I remembered. The same sagging plaid couch, the same recliner with the broken lever, the same brick fireplace with blackened edges from years of overzealous fires. The air smelled like wood smoke and lemon polish, with a faint undercurrent of cold air sneaking in around the old windows. Dad sat in the recliner, elbows on his knees, hands clasped so tight his knuckles were white. Mom perched on the edge of the couch, tissue crumpled in her fist. Michael leaned against the doorway, arms folded. Deborah paced a slow line in front of the coffee table, stocking feet whispering on the rug. They all looked up when I stepped in. Mom's shoulders sagged with relief. "Is Liam okay?" she asked. "He's asleep," I said.
He's fine. I told him the truth. He believes me. Dad flinched at that last part. I moved closer to the fireplace, letting the heat warm the back of my legs. The crackle of the logs filled the quiet. Nobody offered me a seat. Good. I didn't want one. "You got something to say? Say it," Dad muttered, staring at the floor. For a heartbeat, I almost laughed. He sounded like one of my sergeants trying to bluff through after a bad call. "I do," I said. I looked at Mom first. "I'm not going to pretend everything's okay," I said. "If you need to leave, I get it. But I'm not sugarcoating this so anyone can sleep easier tonight." She shook her head. "I'm tired of sugarcoating," she said hoarsely. "Say it." I turned to my father. He still wouldn't look at me. "You hurt my kid," I said. "On a holiday. In your house." He opened his mouth. "I didn't," he started. "You grabbed him," I said.
You left a bruise. You told him that crying makes him weak and that hurting me made me strong. Those are your words coming out of his mouth. If you say, "I didn't abuse him, it was a tap," one more time, I might actually lose my composure. His jaw snapped shut. The fire popped, sending up a shower of sparks behind the grate. "You're blowing this out of proportion," he muttered. "Kids fall. Kids bruise. You act like I broke his arm." "You broke something," I said. "It just isn't bone." He looked up then, eyes sharp. "I raised you to be tough," he said, "to stand up for yourself. Look at you. Captain. Army. You going to tell me my way didn't work?" "Yes," I said plainly. "It didn't work. You didn't make me strong. You made me scared. I made myself strong so I wouldn't need you." The words stunned even me with their bluntness. Michael let out a low breath. "Damn," he whispered. Dad's cheeks flushed. "You think the Army would have taken you if I'd let you coddle yourself?" he demanded. "You think you got through basic by being soft?" "Basic was easy compared to living here," I said. He barked a laugh. "Bull," he said. "Utter bull." I stepped closer, feeling the heat from the fire climb my back. "I've been mortared," I said. "I've done convoy routes where every piece of trash on the roadside could be an IED. I've made decisions that meant someone lived or died. And I slept better there than I ever did in this house. You know why?" He said nothing. "Because over there, when someone yelled at me, it was about a mission," I said. "Not about their ego. When someone corrected me, it was to keep someone alive, not because my tears offended them. I knew what the danger was. It wasn't hiding behind 'I love you' and 'I'm just toughening you up.'" His face crumpled for a second, then hardened. "I loved you," he said. "All of you. Every damn second. I worked 2 jobs. I kept a roof over your heads. I didn't drink like my old man. I didn't run out. I stayed." "That's the minimum," Michael said quietly from the doorway. "Not a medal." Dad shot him a look, but Michael held it, for once. "You can love someone and hurt them," Deborah said softly. "Both can be true. You loving us doesn't cancel out what you did." He shook his head, stubborn. "I gave you structure," he insisted. "Kids need boundaries." "There's a difference between boundaries and fear," I said. "You didn't draw lines to keep us safe. You moved the lines whenever your mood shifted and made us responsible for guessing where they were." He opened his mouth, closed it. I pressed. "You remember making me stand in the living room for an hour for rolling my eyes?" I asked. "You remember slapping Michael for spilling milk? You remember telling me if I didn't stop crying, you'd give me a real reason to cry?" He winced. I was young," he said. "I didn't know any better. That's how my father—" "There it is," Deborah murmured.
He glared at her.
That's how my father did it, he went on, louder. He beat the living hell out of me. Every day. Belt, fists, whatever was handy. I swore I'd be better. And I was.
Mom frowned.
You were less, she said. Not better. He stared at her like she'd slapped him. I took the hands-on your father gave me and dialed them down, she said, voice trembling. I called that progress. But I watched our kids flinch when your boots hit the porch. I watched Julia turn into a statue every time you cleared your throat. I told myself that was respect. It was fear.
The room felt hot and cold at once. Dad's breathing sped up, the fabric of his shirt rising and falling under the tan of his neck.
So what? You all sit here and call me a monster? He snapped. I didn't know another way. He taught me his, I tried to soften it. Sorry I wasn't perfect.
I'm not asking for perfect, I said. I'm asking for honest. Start by saying what you did, not what your father did. What you did. He shook his head again,
but the movement was less certain. I got carried away, he muttered. Try again, I said. I shouldn't have grabbed him, he said, a little clearer. Michael snorted. Understatement of the year, he said. Mike? Mom warned, but there was no real heat in it. I held my father's gaze. What you did was wrong, I said. Not a bit much, not old school. Wrong. To him, to us, to me. He swallowed. I was trying to make him strong, he argued, but the conviction was melting. Strong for what? I asked. So he can stomach Thanksgiving with you without flinching? So he learns to hide his fear so you don't feel uncomfortable? That's not strength. That's armor you made us build to survive you. He blinked hard. For the first time, he looked old. Not invincible. Just a man in a worn-out recliner, held together by stories that weren't holding anymore. I didn't know another way, he said again, but softer. My old man. He told me I was nothing. Only time he said I was worth a damn was when I didn't cry. When I took the hit. I thought, that's how you make men. And did it make you feel like a man when an 8-year-old repeated your words and you dropped your glass? I asked. He flinched like I'd hit him. His hand lifted involuntarily to his temple, rubbing like he could wipe the memory away. That's not fair, he whispered. Neither is grabbing a kid in the hallway, I said. But here we are. Deborah sank onto the couch beside Mom, knees pulled up, watching him. Dad, she said, I have spent my whole adult life anxious as hell, apologizing before I even speak. Mike jokes his way out of everything. Julia joined the army. You really think all that is coincidence? He looked from her to Michael to me. Maybe I pushed too hard sometimes, he said. Sometimes, Michael echoed under his breath. I took a step closer to the chair. The fire crackled, heat pressing against my back. Say the word, I said. He frowned. What word? He asked. Wrong, I said. Say it about yourself, not about your father, not about how things were, about what you did to us, to Liam, today. He stared at his hands. For a long moment, I thought he'd deflect again, reach for a joke, blame the whiskey, blame the world. He didn't. He exhaled, long and shaky. I was wrong, he said finally. The word seemed to cost him something. I was wrong. To grab him, to call him weak, to call you weak. To pretend what I did to you was structure and not fear.
Mom's hand flew to her mouth again. Deborah started crying quietly, relief and grief tangled together. Michael looked away, blinking fast. I just stood there. I'd imagined this moment 1,000 times, usually during sleepless nights in barracks that smelled like dust and sweat and homesickness. In my imagination, it felt triumphant. In reality, it just felt heavy, like a dam finally cracking. Dad scrubbed at his face with the heel of his hand.
I don't know how to do this any other way,
he admitted.
I don't know how to be soft, or whatever the hell you want.
I'm not asking you to be soft, I said. I'm asking you to be safe. There's a difference. He nodded, eyes still on the floor.
What do I do now?
He asked, voice small. You start by apologizing to Liam, I said. Not with excuses, not with back in my day. You tell him you were wrong. You tell him he wasn't weak. You tell him crying is okay, and you won't grab him again. He swallowed.
And then?
He asked. Then you back that up, I said. Day after day, year after year. You go to therapy. You read something besides Marine manuals. You learn what discipline looks like when it's not about control. You earn the right to be in his life on our terms, not yours. He nodded slowly.
I don't know if I can fix what I did to you,
he said. You can't, I said. That belongs to the past now. But you can stop doing it to him. The clock on the mantel ticked, each second loud in the quiet. Dad pushed his hands against his knees,
levering himself up out of the recliner. His joints crackled in protest. Where is he? He asked. Upstairs, I said. Rocket ship room. He took a step toward the hallway, then paused. Julia, he said without turning. When you said those war zones were safer than here, did you mean it?
Yes, I said. And you just proved why. He flinched again, then nodded.
I'll try to earn a different answer, he said.
As he shuffled toward the stairs, the boards creaked under his weight. The sound reminded me of storms from my childhood. Night thunder, the swing creaking, his boots on the porch. Only this time, his steps didn't sound like approaching weather. They sounded like a man climbing toward something he was finally ready to see. Behind me, the fire popped, sending a tiny ember briefly glowing against the grate before it burned out. The house was still the same. Porch swing, ugly wallpaper, mismatched furniture. But for the first time, the script was different. He'd said the word, wrong, out loud, in front of all of us. It didn't erase anything, but it cracked the seal on decades of silence and gave me just enough space to believe that maybe this was the moment the cycle stopped passing itself off as love. By the time I reached the bottom of the stairs, I could hear his voice through the half-open bedroom door. Not the booming bark I was used to. Something quieter, unsteady. And I shouldn't have done it, he was saying. I was wrong to grab you, wrong to say those things. I paused in the hallway, back against the old floral wallpaper, letting the words settle before stepping closer. The nightlight in the hall cast a soft glow, turning the edges of the doorway into a washed-out rectangle. The house smelled like old carpet and the faint, sweet ghost of Thanksgiving pies cooling hours ago. I nudged the door a little wider with my foot. Dad was kneeling beside the bed. Kneeling.
The man who'd made us stand at attention in this same house now had both knees pressed into the worn rug, hands resting on the edge of Liam's quilt. Liam sat propped against the pillows, quilt pulled up to his chest, fingers twisted in the fabric. The bruise under his eye looked more purple in the lamplight. "You're not weak," Dad said, his voice rough. "You hear me? You cried because you were scared, and I made you scared. That's on me, not you."
Liam peered at him, wary. "But you said," he started.
"I know what I said."
Dad cut in, flinching.
"I said it to your mom when she was little too. I thought that's what you do, to make kids tough, to keep them from being hurt later. I was wrong."
The words didn't seem easier the second time. He blew out a breath, shoulders sagging.
"My dad hit me a lot,"
he said.
"More than I ever laid a hand on your mom. I told myself that meant I was doing better. I never really thought about how it felt to be on the other side of it. Not until today, when you repeated my words."
His hand shook where it rested on the blanket.
"I dropped my glass because I heard myself,"
he admitted.
"And I didn't like the man I heard."
Liam's fingers loosened. "Mom said, people can change if they want to," he said carefully. "Do you want to?" Dad nodded once, the motion stiff.
"I do,"
he said.
"I don't know how yet. It's new. But I don't want you to be scared of me. I don't want you to think crying makes you weak. Crying makes you human. Any old Marine manual that says otherwise needs to go in the trash."
A tiny smile twitched at the corner of Liam's mouth. "You were a Marine?" he asked.
"Long time ago,"
Dad said.
"Before your mom. Before I knew what to do with anything but orders and yelling."
"Do Marines cry?" Liam asked. The question hung in the small room. Dad swallowed.
"Yeah,"
he said.
"Yeah, they do. Sometimes alone. Sometimes with their buddies. I just forgot that part, or pretended it didn't exist."
He glanced toward the door.
I stepped in fully. "I didn't want to intrude," I said. "You should be here," Dad said quickly. He looked back at Liam. "I hurt your mom, too," he said. "Not just with hands, with words, with the way I acted like feelings were something you could beat out of somebody. That wasn't love. That was fear wearing boots." He let out a weird laugh that had no humor in it. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away," he said, "or ever. But I wanted you to know what happened downstairs? That wasn't your fault. It was mine." Liam blinked slowly. "Are you going to grab me again?" he asked. Dad's face crumpled. "No," he said. "Never again. If I ever raise my hand, your mom will drag me out by my ear, and I'll deserve it." A flicker of mischief crossed Liam's face. "She could," he said. "She's stronger than you." Dad choked out a genuine laugh. "Yeah," he said. "She is." They both looked at me. "Do you believe him?" Liam asked. The question was for me, not my father. I weighed my answer. "I believe he's telling the truth about wanting to change," I said. "Wanting isn't the same as doing, but it's a start." Dad nodded, accepting the qualifier. Liam considered that. "Okay," he said finally. "I forgive you. A little." Dad's eyes went shiny. I'll take a little, he said. I'll work on the rest. He stood slowly, knees protesting, hand on the mattress for balance. As he straightened, he reached out to ruffle Liam's hair, then stopped mid-motion. Can I? He asked, lowering his hand. The ask mattered more than the touch. Liam nodded. Gently, he said. Dad smiled, soft. Gently, he echoed, resting his palm briefly on the top of Liam's head, fingers barely pressing. Get some sleep, kiddo, he added. You did something braver than most grown men I know today. Liam's chest puffed out, just a little. Good night, Grandpa, he murmured. Good night, Dad said. He stepped back. I tucked Liam in tighter, smoothing the quilt. I'll be downstairs, I said. Door open. Call if you need me. He nodded, already sinking into the pillow's curve. As we left, Dad pulled the door mostly closed, leaving a crack of light. The hallway felt less oppressive now. Same wallpaper, same squeaky floorboard near the top of the stairs, but lighter somehow. We descended in silence. At the bottom, he paused again, one hand on the banister. I didn't think I'd ever kneel like that, he said, for anything other than prayer or a busted pipe. You did good, I said quietly. Now you have to keep doing good. That's the hard part. He huffed. Figures my daughter would turn this into a long campaign instead of a quick battle, he said. That's how you win wars, I replied. Not with one big explosion, with 1,000 small choices. We walked back into the living room. Mom was still on the couch, tissue now a shredded mess. Deborah sat beside her, hand on her shoulder. Michael had claimed the far armchair, staring into the fire like it could answer questions. Well? Michael asked. Dad sank back into his recliner, but it looked different now. Not a throne, just a chair. I apologized, he said simply. Told him it was wrong. No excuses. Mom exhaled a breath that sounded like it had been stuck in her chest for years. Thank you, she whispered. Dad looked at her, really looked. Ellen, he said. I'm sorry. To you. For all the times I made you patch things over. For all the times you begged me to ease up and I said you were too soft. You were the only buffer those kids had. I acted like that was a flaw. It wasn't. Tears spilled over in her eyes. I didn't do enough, she said. I should have. You did what you could, I cut in gently. We're not here to put you on trial. Dad nodded. She's right, he said. If anyone failed them, it was me, not you. Deborah let out a shaky laugh. Is this real life? She asked. Did Thanksgiving just turn into group therapy? Could be worse, Michael said. Could have turned into a food fight. We all laughed, soft and surprised. The fire crackled. The house settled around us, wood creaking as the heat shifted. It would have been easy to leave it there. Apology spoken, tension eased. Pretend the job was done. But I'd spent too long in systems that looked okay on the surface, while problems rotted underneath. Just so we're clear, I said, looking at Dad. This doesn't mean everything's fine now. I'm glad you apologized. I'm glad you see some of it. But it's going to take time before I trust leaving Liam here without me. Before I can sit at this table without flinching when you move too fast. He nodded, accepting the terms. I figured, he said. I don't expect a free pass. Hell, I barely expected you to still be in this room. I'm here for him, I said. Not for the turkey. Michael lifted his glass of soda. Here's to brutal honesty, he said, and to not passing our crap down to the next generation. Deborah clinked her water against his. "Amen," she said. Dad picked up his fresh glass, this one filled with ginger ale, and held it out, hand steady. "To doing better," he said, "late as it is." We all touched our glasses to his. The sound was softer than the shatter from earlier, but it rang just as loud in my chest. Later, when everyone drifted off to bed, dishes done, leftovers stacked in the fridge, I stood alone in the dark kitchen. The tile under my feet was cold. Moonlight slanted through the window above the sink, painting the countertops in silver. I looked at the spot on the floor where the glass had broken earlier. The wood was dry now, a faint, sticky ring the only evidence. It wasn't erased, just cleaned up. That was the work now. Not pretending there'd never been shards, making sure nobody stepped on them again. Morning in my parents' house always came with the same soundtrack: the soft clatter of dishes, the low rumble of the dishwasher, the creak of the porch swing starting its lazy arc outside. This time, the smell was different. Less cigarette ghosts and burnt toast, more fresh coffee and model glue? I padded into the kitchen in socks and an old t-shirt, the tile cool under my feet. Sunlight poured in through the window, turning the steam rising from the sink into a soft haze. At the table, spread out on yesterday's newspaper, were little gray plastic pieces: wings, fuselage, tiny propellers. A model marine plane, mid-assembly. On one side sat Liam, hair sticking up, wearing his pajamas. On the other sat Dad, reading glasses perched on the end of his nose, a bottle of glue in his hand. He looked up when he heard me. "Morning," he said. His voice sounded normal. Not overly careful, not performative, just morning.
"Hey, Mom," Liam said, beaming. "Grandpa's showing me how to build planes. The right way, not the smash 'em together way." Dad chuckled.
"Patience is part of the mission," he said. "You rush, the wings fall off." He glanced at me, an unspoken question in his eyes. Is this okay? I pulled a mug from the cabinet, poured coffee. The smell was rich and bitter, familiar. "You two look busy," I said, leaning against the counter.
"We're at step 7, Liam said. "It's the wings. Grandpa said this part takes real focus." He scrunched his face into a mock serious look. "Real focus," he repeated, mimicking Dad's tone. Dad smiled, small. "Yeah, well," he said. "Some jobs deserve your full attention." He applied a tiny bead of glue along a wing edge, hands steady. His fingers, which I'd only ever thought of as blunt instruments before, were surprisingly careful. "Hold it there," he told Liam. "Don't squeeze too hard. Gentle pressure until it sets." Liam obeyed, tongue poking out in concentration. The scene was so ordinary, it hurt. I took a sip of coffee, letting the heat sit on my tongue. Ellen bustled in from the porch, robe tied tight, cheeks pink from the morning chill. "Oh, good," she said when she saw me. "You're up. Coffee's fresh." "I noticed," I said. "Smells better than the stuff in the motor pool." She smiled, a little wistful. "Your father wanted to start on the model first thing," she said. "Didn't even turn on the news. Just sat with him." She lowered her voice. "I've never seen him." She trailed off, searching. "Careful, like that, with a kid." There was a lot packed into that observation. Dad cleared his throat. "Ellen," he said, "stop narrating. You'll make me self-conscious." She kissed the top of his head on her way to the coffee pot. "You could use a little self-consciousness," she said. He grunted, but he didn't snap. That was new. I took another sip, watching them. "Grandpa?" Liam asked, eyes on the model. "Did you build these when you were in the Marines?" Dad shook his head.
No, he said. Didn't have the patience back then. Just wanted the big stuff, the loud stuff.
He glanced at me.
Didn't understand how important the small parts were,
he added. Liam nodded like this was a deep life lesson. Mom always says little things add up, he said, like picking up your socks or telling the truth.
Your mom is right, Dad said. Don't get used to me saying that. I have a reputation.
He flashed me a quick, sheepish smile. I raised my mug in a mock toast. Documented, I said. You agreeing with me. Witnessed by coffee and plastic. He snorted.
Don't drag the plane into this, he said.
Deborah wandered in next, hair in a messy bun, clutching a mug that said, World's Okayest Aunt. She stopped dead when she saw the table.
Well, I'll be damned, she said. Actual intergenerational bonding without anyone crying? Mark the calendar.
Language, Mom scolded automatically.
Sorry, Deborah said, not sounding sorry at all.
She looked at me. How you feeling? She asked softly. I considered the question. Sore, I said. Like I ran a mental marathon, but lighter, in a weird way. Same, she said. Michael poked his head in, phone in hand.
You all know the group chat's exploding, right?
He said.
Aunt Patty wants to know if Dad's okay because he's not sending his usual Thanksgiving brag texts. I'm fine, Dad said. Tell Patty I'm busy.
Busy doing what? Michael asked, smirking. Dad looked at Liam carefully fitting a wing.
Course correction, he said.
We all went quiet for a second. The phrase hung in the kitchen, simple and heavier than it sounded. Michael typed something into his phone. What did you tell her? I asked.
That you're under new management, he said, and Mom finally hired a consultant.
Mom whacked him lightly with a dish towel.
Be nice, she said. This is me being nice, he protested. Old me would have made a far worse joke.
I shook my head, smiling. Liam slid the wing into place. Is it okay if I come back again? He blurted. The question surprised us all. Dad froze, glue bottle in hand.
You mean here?
He asked. Liam nodded. Yeah, he said. If Mom says it's okay, and if you don't grab me, and if we can build the helicopter next time. He said it matter-of-factly, like he was negotiating mission parameters. All eyes swung to me. I set my mug down, the ceramic clicking softly on the countertop. Here's how this works, I said, looking at Dad. Visits happen if you keep doing what you did last night. Owning your stuff. Keeping your hands open, not fists. If you start to slip, we're out that door before the next commercial break. No second chances on that. He nodded. Fair, he said. More than fair. I looked at Liam. If I ever say we're leaving, I said, we leave. No questions. Even if you're in the middle of the coolest plane ever. Agreed? He nodded solemnly. Agreed, he said. Good, I said. That's called a boundary. It's not punishment, it's protection. Dad exhaled slowly. I'm going to mess up, he said quietly. I know I am. Habits this old don't disappear overnight. But I'll keep working on it. I've already called the VA. They've got some group thing. Anger, parental stuff. I'm gonna go, for real.
Not just once. Mom stared at him. You did? She asked. He shrugged, suddenly shy. Figured if my daughter can walk into a war zone, I can walk into a conference room, he said.
Deborah's eyes filled. I never thought I'd see the day you voluntarily talked about feelings in a group, she said.
Do they give out patches for that? If they do, I'm not sewing it on my jacket, he muttered. I have a reputation. Yeah, I said. That's what we're fixing. We all laughed, small and genuine. The porch swing creaked outside, pushed by the November wind. The same sound I'd listened to as a kid, heart racing, trying to gauge his mood. This morning, it sounded different. Less like a warning, more like punctuation. A familiar noise in a house that was finally learning a new language. Later, when we loaded up the car, leftover containers packed, Liam clutching his half-built plane like a trophy, Dad walked us out to the driveway. The sky was a pale winter blue, breath puffing white in the cold air. The driveway gravel crunched under our boots. He looked smaller in the daylight, without the dining room's false stage around him. Julia, he said, hands shoved in his pockets. I know words aren't enough. I nodded. They're a start, I said. Actions do the rest. He swallowed. I can't promise I'll be the grandfather you want right away, he said. But I can promise I won't be the one I was yesterday. Not if I can help it. That was about as honest as it got. Good, I said, because my kid deserves better than I got. That's non-negotiable. He looked at Liam, then back at me. I'm sorry for making you feel small, he said, for calling your tears weak, for making this house a place you wanted to escape instead of come home to. The wind lifted the edges of his jacket. If you give me time, he added, I'd like to earn my way into whatever version of your life you'll have me in. I studied his face. There were more lines than I remembered. A different tension. Less defensive, more open. I'm not erasing what happened, I said. You don't get a clean slate, but you get a shot at writing different pages from here on out. For him, for you, maybe even for me, eventually. He nodded, a tiny, hopeful movement. I can live with that, he said. Liam tugged my sleeve. Can I tell him something? He whispered. Go ahead, I said. He walked up to his grandfather, the gravel crunching under his small sneakers. Grandpa? He said. Yeah, kiddo? Dad replied. Liam looked him in the eye. If you forget, he said, about the crying thing or the grabbing thing, I'm going to tell Mom, and she's going to tell you again. And you're not allowed to get mad. That's part of the deal. Dad stared at him for a moment. Then he smiled. Fair terms, he said. You've got yourself a contract, little man. He held out his hand. Liam shook it, serious as any soldier. On the drive home, as fields blurred past and the radio hummed low, Liam fell asleep in the back seat, plain pieces cradled against his chest. I watched him in the rear-view mirror, that small bruise under his eye already starting to soften at the edges. The house we'd just left was still the same from the outside. White siding, porch swing, old trees. But something underneath had shifted. A glass had shattered. Words had been said that couldn't be unsaid. An ex-Marine had knelt beside a child's bed and admitted he was wrong. The cycle hadn't magically disappeared, but it had cracked. And in the cracks, tiny, stubborn shoots of something else were pushing through. Not perfection, not instant healing, just the first fragile signs of a different kind of strength. The kind that doesn't need to break a child to prove it's there. Real strength breaks the cycle, not the child. If you've ever sworn your kids would never inherit the pain you did, follow the channel for stories of women in uniform who break the cycle and redefine strength.